Hello and welcome, my name's David and this is the channel where I do tech stuff. Now, 6 months ago I made a video about the airflow in an NZXT S340 case, and it's not been received very well because I wasn't hugely thorough with it and I just didn't do it properly. But that was back when I had no professionalism. I was starting the channel, it was one of my first videos, so I decided to tackle it again and do it properly this time, with all of the concerted effort of my growing professionalism. Now, the premise of that initial video was to see whether or not it was necessary to buy extra intake fans because, well, NZXT doesn't include any of them with the S340, and because it's a fairly budget case, it's not hugely cheap, but it's fairly budget, it is a bit of a stretch sometimes to add more intake fans if they're not necessary. So I put a fan in the front, it made no difference, and then took it away. So the conclusion of my video was that, well, don't buy intake fans because it doesn't really matter. The reason I said this happened though was because the airflow was good enough in the front of the S340 that it doesn't make a difference adding more fans. But this is obviously a terrible conclusion because if there was very good airflow in the front, it would have meant that fans would have made it. So let's see how I decided to go about the tests with my newfound professionalism. So the fans that I decided to use are Fantex 140mm premium fans. I genuinely think that that's what they're actually called because I can't find any more naming information on them. And how I decided to configure them in the case was have one test with no fans in it, another test with 140mm fan in the bottom fan mount, and then another test with it in the top fan mount, and then another test with them in both fan mounts. And then I decided to even be more thorough as humanly possible. I did all of those tests again without the front panel on to see how much of a difference the front panel makes in actually constricting airflow into the case. And for the three of you that's never seen an NZXT S340 before, here's a quick glimpse of what the case looks like. As far as how I decided to get the internal components toasty, I used IDA64's stress test on the CPU, and then I did Furmark on the GPU, so pretty much a maximum thermal load for the system. And then I ran that test setup for 15 minutes and then took a temperature there. As far as ambient room temperature goes, I don't actually have an accurate thermometer that I can test the room temperature with, but I did run my air conditioning unit for the entire day before the testing at 19 degrees, and I'm pretty sure that's the temperature that room was at, but there is some margin of error there. Although while I was running the tests as well, the aircon was running at that temperature and I did all of the tests consecutively, so hopefully there wasn't a huge variation in room temperature between the tests. Whew, okay, I'm almost finished with all of the housekeeping. I just have one more piece of information that you need, and that's what system components did I use. So the PC was running an i5 7600K that's been overclocked to 4.2 GHz. It's a fairly mild overclock, to be honest. It's being cooled by a CryoRig H7, and then I have a GTX 1060 in there. It's a pallet card, which means it's not a blower style card, so it dumps all of its heat straight into the case. Okay, there we go. Let's see what the results of all of these tests actually were. And unfortunately, the test results are fairly similar to the first time I ran the tests. The only time it made any difference in temperature is when you add the fan to the top slot, then it shaves like 2, maybe 3 degrees off of the CPU temperature. But none of the configurations made any difference to the GPU temperature. But the story is completely different when you actually pull the front panel off, because then the fans made a pretty big difference in temperature. In fact, when you have both slots occupied with fans, it actually makes up to a 9-degree difference in CPU temperature, which is a pretty big deal. So what that does is show that the reason that adding front fans doesn't matter for the NZXT S340 is because it's just too constricted in the front. There isn't enough air to come in to feed the fans to be able to make any noticeable difference in temperature in the actual case. And with that, I think it's time for a conclusion, and rather boringly, it's fairly similar to what it was last time. There's a little bit of a different spin on it because I have more information to base my conclusion on, but yeah, the point is that it makes a very small difference. If you populate the top fan spot, you're going to save a couple of degrees on your CPU fan temperature, but is that really worth the extra noise and expenditure? Even if you have a fan lying around, I wouldn't necessarily recommend populating that slot with it because it's not going to give you a huge amount of benefit for the noise that it's going to generate. And that kind of brings me to the issue of cases like the NZXT S340 with that solid front panel design. Yes, it looks very nice, but it's just too constrictive, and airflow wise it's a bit of an issue. And with something like the Fractal Design Meshify C, you can have a good looking front panel that is very breathable. It doesn't have to be like closed off with zero airflow. That being said though, temperature isn't that much of an issue with this system. I've been running it for about a year now almost, and I've never had any issues during long sessions of gaming with temperature at all. So it's not that the temperatures in the case is terrible, it's just that it's not as good as it can be, and there isn't much room for improvement over the stock configuration. Anyway, with that, I think I'm already droning on for too long, so thank you very much for watching this video. If you liked it and you thought it was better than the previous one, please do like the video and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this one. And until next time, bye bye.